Ladies and gentlemen, dear listeners, allow me first to greet you and to thank you for your attentive presence. For what we are about to undertake together is not a simple intellectual stroll, but an inner journey, a demanding crossing of our own depths. And to begin, let me ask you a brutal question. Are you free? Not free in the political or legal sense, but inwardly free. Free from your fears, free from your anger, free from your desires. If you are honest with yourselves, you may feel, as I do, that the answer is painful. No, we are not free. We are slaves, slaves to our emotions. Look at your days. How many of your decisions are made through reason, and how many under the sway of impulse? How many times has fear kept you from acting? How many times has anger dictated your words? How many times has anxiety paralyzed you? We believe ourselves to be masters of our lives, yet in truth, we are ruled by inner forces we do not understand. Modern society, far from helping us, deepens this servitude. We are told again and again to listen to our emotions, to follow our hearts, to express what we feel. But isn't this demand for emotional authenticity, in reality, a new form of slavery? For if I do nothing but follow my emotions, I am not free. I am a plaything of my anger, a hostage to my desires, a prey to my anxieties. This is where Stoicism enters the stage. This school of thought, born more than 2,000 years ago in ancient times, extends to us a firm and lucid hand. It tells us, you suffer not because of things themselves, but because of the judgments you make about them. That is the heart of Stoicism. Our emotions are not biological destinies, but mental constructions. It is not events that crush us, but the way we think about them. And if we could learn to think differently, to judge differently, to see differently, then our emotions would cease to be tyrants and would become allies. Then we would no longer be slaves, but sovereigns. In this podcast, we will explore that promise. We will first examine what the Stoics meant by emotion and why they regarded it as a form of mistaken judgment. We will then come to understand that the root of our passions lies in our judgments, and that to correct these judgments is already to begin freeing ourselves. We will discover the practical exercises of Stoic discipline, those daily practices that help tame fear, anger, and pain. Finally, we will see that the ultimate goal of Stoicism is not to become insensitive, but invincible, to attain an inner freedom that nothing and no one can take from us. So, dear listeners, I invite you to embark on this journey with me, not to learn dead theories, but to experience living wisdom, not to recite maxims, but to transform our lives. For to conquer our emotions is not to become statues of marble. It is to become truly free human beings. To understand what it means to conquer our emotions from a Stoic perspective, we must first pause on an essential question. What is an emotion? For if we do not know what we are fighting against, we risk battling ghosts. Now, for the Stoics, an emotion is not a biological inevitability, not an inner storm we must passively endure, nor some mysterious essence that descends upon us like a curse. No, an emotion is a judgment, an interpretation, a way of seeing the world. It is not the thing itself that upsets us, but the idea we form of it. Epictetus, the slave-turned-philosopher, expressed it with unflinching clarity. It is not things themselves that trouble men, but the judgments they make about things. Here lies the heart of Stoic doctrine. Our passions are not objective realities, but mental constructions. Let us take a simple example. Someone insults you. The insult itself is merely a sound, a vibration in the air, a sequence of syllables. But if you judge that this insult diminishes you, that it wounds your dignity or humiliates you, then you become angry. It is not the word that hurts you. It is the meaning you assign to it. Likewise with the fear of death. It is not death itself that frightens us, for we do not yet know it, but the idea we construct around it, the imagination we weave. Seneca puts it with irony. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Thus, fear, anger, jealousy, and sadness are not brute facts, but mistaken judgments. They arise from a confusion between what depends on us and what does not. And here lies the Stoic key: to distinguish. To distinguish between the raw event and our interpretation of it. To distinguish between what is within our power and what is not. To distinguish between reality and opinion. For most of our suffering comes from demanding of the world what it cannot give. We want others to respect us, fortune to favor us, health to stay with us, and death to forget us. But none of this is within our control. And when reality resists, we grow angry, desperate, we collapse. The Stoic, however, learns to correct his judgments. He learns to say, "What does not depend on me cannot harm me. What depends on me is my judgment, and therein lies my freedom." This idea may seem abstract, yet it has immense practical power. Imagine you are stuck in traffic. Most people grow irritated, honk, curse other drivers, the government, life itself. But to what end? The traffic jam does not depend on you. What depends on you is how you live it. You can choose to experience it as torment, or to accept it as an opportunity for patience, reflection, perhaps even meditation. The event is the same, but the judgment changes everything. This is what the Stoics called prohairesis, the faculty of judgment, of choice, of giving meaning. And here we reach a disturbing truth. If our emotions are judgments, then we are responsible for them. We can no longer say, "I can't help it, I'm angry," or "I can't help it, I'm afraid." We must say, "I have chosen, consciously or not, to judge this situation in such a way, and it is this judgment that produces my anger or my fear." This responsibility is heavy, but it is liberating. For if I am responsible for my emotions, then I can transform them. What is suffered cannot be changed. What is chosen can be corrected. The Stoics thus distinguish two kinds of inner movements. The first, which they call pre-passions, propathei, are immediate, physiological reactions beyond our control: a racing heart, a flushed face, trembling hands. These reactions are natural, they are not yet passions. They become passions when we add a judgment. This trembling means I am in danger. This blush means I am humiliated. This silence means I am rejected. It is the judgment that transforms a reaction into an emotion, and it is that judgment we can work upon. Thus, for the Stoics, conquering our emotions does not mean becoming insensitive, but becoming lucid. It is not about suppressing our reactions, but understanding them. It is not about denying our feelings, but placing them in their proper context. It is not about turning into statues of marble, but about becoming sovereign beings. For true freedom is not the absence of feeling. It is the absence of servitude to what we feel. That is why Stoicism is a school of liberation. It teaches us that our emotions are not destinies, but constructions. That our passions are not condemnations, but choices. That our sufferings are not realities, but judgments. And what is judged can be judged otherwise. What is constructed can be deconstructed. What is learned can be unlearned. To philosophize stoically is to learn to judge differently, to see differently, to live differently. If the Stoics insist so strongly on distinguishing between what depends on us and what does not, it is because they identified the true root of our passions, our judgments. Emotions do not arise from things themselves, but from the opinions we form about them. This idea seems simple, yet it is of dizzying depth, for it means that anger, fear, jealousy, and sadness are not natural inevitabilities, but errors of judgment. And if they are errors, then they can be corrected. That is why Stoicism is not a philosophy of resignation, but a philosophy of liberation. Take anger. Why do we become angry? Because we judge that an injustice has been done to us, that someone has disrespected us, that the world has denied us what we believe we deserve. But is that judgment valid? Seneca, in his treatise on anger, explains that anger is always disproportionate, always blind, always destructive. It repairs nothing, corrects nothing, builds nothing. It is the fruit of an illusion, the belief that the world should conform to our desires. But the world owes us nothing. Others owe us nothing. And if we stop judging that an offense is intolerable, anger extinguishes itself. Take fear. Why are we afraid? Because we judge that some evil threatens us, that danger lurks, that a dark future awaits. But is that judgment certain? Seneca again. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Fear is anticipation, projection, fiction. We tremble before ghosts. We torment ourselves with scenarios that do not yet exist. And when the misfortune finally arrives, it is often far less terrible than we imagined. Fear, then, is an error of judgment. We confuse the possible with the certain, the imaginary with the real. Take jealousy. Why are we jealous? Because we judge that another's happiness diminishes our own, that their success threatens our worth, that their love robs us of something. But is that judgment just? No. Another's happiness takes nothing from us. Another's success does not deprive us of ours. Another's love does not dispossess us. Jealousy is an illusion, the belief that life is a zero-sum game, where one person's gain is another's loss. But life is not a competition, it is a creation. And if we stop judging others as rivals, jealousy vanishes. Finally, take sadness. Why are we sad? Because we judge that some good has been taken from us, that a loss is irreparable, that a void is final. But is that judgment true? The loss is real. Yes, but is it an evil? For the Stoics, it is not. What does not depend on us cannot be an evil. The death of a loved one, the loss of a job, the end of a relationship, these are painful events, but they are not evils in themselves. What is evil is the judgment that they destroy our life, annihilate our being, or condemn us to despair. Sadness, then, is an error of judgment, the belief that we cannot live without what we have lost. But we can, and we must. Thus, all our passions share a common root, an erroneous judgment. We believe the world must conform to our desires, that the future must meet our expectations, that others must fulfill our needs, that life must shield us from loss. And when reality contradicts us, we suffer. But it is not reality that makes us suffer, it is our judgment. That is why Epictetus insists so strongly on the discipline of judgment. He urges us to examine every thought, every impression, every reaction, and ask, does this depend on me? Is this judgment true? Am I confusing my opinion with reality? This discipline is demanding, but it is liberating, for it makes us responsible for our emotions. It pulls us out of passivity. It prevents us from saying, I can't help it, I'm angry, or I can't help it, I'm afraid. It forces us to say, I judged that this situation was intolerable, and it is that judgment which produces my anger or my fear. And if I have judged, I can judge otherwise. If I have constructed, I can deconstruct. If I have learned, I can unlearn. That is why Stoicism is a school of lucidity. It teaches us to see our emotions not as inevitabilities, but as choices, not as condemnations, but as mistakes, not as enemies, but as disguised teachers. For every emotion is an opportunity to learn. Every passion is an invitation to correct our judgment. Every suffering is a chance to grow. To philosophize stoically is thus to practice this discipline of judgment. It is to learn to suspend assent, to resist being swept away by first impressions, to examine each thought before accepting it. It is to learn to say, it is not the event that troubles me, but my judgment, and that judgment I can change. It is to learn to become sovereign over oneself. If the Stoics identified the root of the passions in our judgments, they did not stop there. They proposed a true discipline of life, an ascetic practice, to learn how to correct these judgments and regain control over ourselves. For them, to philosophize is not to debate in schools, but to practice daily, at every moment, in the most ordinary situations as well as in the most tragic. Stoic philosophy is a gymnasium for the soul, a daily practice, and asceticism in the truest sense, a training. Asceticism as daily training. The word asceticism comes from the Greek askesis, meaning exercise. For the Stoics, the goal was not to speculate about abstract concepts, but to train oneself to live according to reason. Just as an athlete trains daily to strengthen his body, the Stoic philosopher trains daily to strengthen his mind. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and philosopher, wrote each morning in his meditations reminders, exhortations, and maxims, not to impress others, but to prepare himself for the day ahead. He knew that each day would bring trials, unjust men, unexpected events, physical pain, frustrations, and he prepared to face them with serenity. The fundamental distinction, what depends on us and what does not. The first Stoic exercise, and the most fundamental, is to distinguish between what depends on us and what does not. Epictetus repeats it tirelessly. Some things are up to us, and some are not. Up to us are our judgments, desires, aversions, and choices. Not up to us are wealth, health, reputation, and death. All Stoic wisdom rests on this distinction. For if I focus my energy on what depends on me, I am invincible. But if I waste it trying to control what does not, I am condemned to frustration, anger, and fear. Consider a concrete example. You fall ill. The illness is not within your control, but your judgment about the illness is. You may experience it as an unbearable injustice, or as an opportunity for patience and courage. You may see it as a curse, or as a test that reveals your inner strength. The illness is the same, but the judgment changes everything. That is the essence of Stoic asceticism, learning to judge differently. Stoic spiritual exercises. The Stoics developed a series of practical exercises to discipline the mind. Among them is premeditatio malorum, the negative visualization, imagining possible misfortunes, not to torment oneself, but to prepare for them. Seneca advises saying each morning, "Today I shall meet an ungrateful, an insolent, an envious man." Thus, when it happens, we are not surprised and can greet it calmly. Another exercise is the suspension of judgment. When an impression seizes us, anger, fear, jealousy, we must learn not to give immediate assent. Marcus Aurelius writes, "Do not say, 'I have lost it,' but 'I have given it back.'" In other words, do not judge too quickly. Wait, examine, ask yourself, does this depend on me? Is this judgment true? This suspension of judgment is a powerful weapon against the passions. A third exercise is daily meditation. The Stoics recommend reviewing one's day each evening, examining one's actions, reactions, and judgments, and asking, did I act according to reason? Did I give in to anger, fear, or sadness? How can I do better tomorrow? This constant self-examination is an asceticism of lucidity. Anger as a case study. Take anger, a universal passion. How does Stoic asceticism help us master it? First, by unmasking it. Anger arises from a false judgment that the world ought to conform to our desires. Second, by preparing for it. If I know I will encounter unjust men, I will not be surprised by their injustice. Finally, by suspending it. When anger rises, I can choose not to consent to it, not to let it carry me away. Seneca writes, "The best remedy for anger is delay. To wait, to breathe, to postpone reaction, that is asceticism." Fear and pain. Fear, too, can be conquered through ascetic practice. By rehearsing loss, failure, and death through negative visualization, I become accustomed to them, and when they arrive, I am not overwhelmed. Pain, likewise, can be endured if I regard it as limited. Epictetus said, "Pain is bearable if you do not exaggerate it through judgment." Asceticism consists in remembering that pain is a fact, but suffering is a judgment. Inner freedom. Ultimately, Stoic asceticism aims at a single goal: inner freedom. To be free is not to do whatever one wants, but to want whatever one does. It is not to control the world, but to control oneself. It is not to abolish emotions, but to restore them to their proper place. The Stoic is not insensitive, he is invincible. For nothing can touch his judgment, nothing can corrupt his inner freedom. Fear and pain, two cruel masters that rule our lives. Two invisible tyrants of immense power. Fear paralyzes us, prevents us from acting, traps us in the anticipation of a suffering that has not yet come. Pain, on the other hand, crushes us in the present, reminding us brutally of our fragility, our vulnerability, our mortal condition. Together, they form a prison. Fear locks us in the future, pain locks us in the moment. And we, poor humans, struggle between these two walls, unable to breathe freely. But the Stoics tell us, these two tyrants are not invincible. They are not gods. They are not inevitabilities. They are only illusions, mistaken judgments. And what is judged can be judged otherwise. Fear, suffering in anticipation. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, wrote the famous line, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." This is the truth about fear. Fear is not the pain of the present, but the anticipated pain of the future. We tremble before ghosts. We torment ourselves with scenarios that do not yet exist. We live 1,000 deaths before dying once. Fear is a fiction, a projection, an illusion. Consider a concrete example, the fear of public speaking. How many men and women would rather flee an opportunity than face the gaze of others? They imagine laughter, judgment, humiliation. But none of that exists yet. These are images fabricated by their minds. And when they finally speak, often none of it happens. Fear made them suffer more than reality ever could. Another example, the fear of failure. How many projects have never seen the light of day because their authors trembled before the possibility of failure? They said to themselves, "What if I fail? What if I lose? What if I look ridiculous?" But failure was not yet real. It was only a possibility. And yet it was enough to paralyze them. This is the cruelty of fear. It steals the present by imprisoning us in the future. The Stoics invite us to combat this illusion through a radical exercise, premeditatio malorum, the negative visualization. It consists of imagining possible misfortunes in advance, not to torture oneself, but to prepare for them. Seneca advises, each day, tell yourself, "Today I will meet an ungrateful, an insolent, an envious man." Thus, when the event occurs, it does not surprise us. We have already envisioned it. We have already tamed it. Fear then loses its power, for what is expected no longer terrifies. Pain, suffering through exaggeration. If fear is suffering anticipated, pain is suffering present. It is more brutal, more immediate, more tangible. Yet again, the Stoics tell us, it is not pain itself that crushes us, but our judgment of pain. Epictetus writes, "Pain is bearable if you do not exaggerate it with your judgment." Take an example, a migraine. The pain is real, physical, undeniable. But if I tell myself, "This is unbearable, I can't live like this, my life is ruined," I double my suffering. I turn pain into despair. But if I tell myself, "It is only pain, it is limited, it will pass," then I endure it more easily. The pain remains the same, but the judgment changes everything. Another example, the loss of a loved one. The pain is immense, devastating. Yet again, the Stoics invite us to distinguish. The death of another does not depend on me. What depends on me is my judgment of that death. If I judge it unbearable, I collapse. If I judge it natural, inevitable, part of the order of the world, then I can face it with dignity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You are a man, you are mortal, you are destined to lose what you love. Why be astonished by what is necessary?" The Stoic strategy, transforming fear and pain. How can one overcome fear and pain? Through reason, ascetic discipline, and exercise. Fear is defeated through preparation, by imagining the worst so as not to be surprised by it. Pain is defeated through lucidity, by understanding it as limited, bearable, natural. In both cases, the key is to correct our judgments. The Stoics also urge us to practice the dichotomy of control. Faced with fear, does what I fear depend on me? If yes, I can act. Therefore, I need not fear. If no, I can do nothing. Therefore, I need not fear either. Faced with pain, can I eliminate it? If yes, I do so. If no, I can always choose my attitude toward it. In both cases, I remain free. Inner freedom in the face of fear and pain. Ultimately, to conquer fear and pain is to attain inner freedom. It is to refuse to be enslaved by the future or the present. It is to refuse to suffer twice, once in anticipation, once in exaggeration. It is to choose to live lucidly, courageously, and with dignity. The Stoic is not insensitive. He feels fear, he feels pain, but he does not obey them. He does not yield to them. He does not grant them power over his life. That is the true victory, not to abolish fear and pain, but to master them. Not to deny them, but to transcend them. Not to flee from them, but to transform them. What is freedom? This question runs through the entire history of philosophy. For most people, freedom is confused with the ability to do what one wants, to travel wherever one desires, to possess whatever one covets, to say what one thinks, to act without constraint. But for the Stoics, this conception is illusory. For if my freedom depends on external conditions, on my wealth, my health, my reputation, or the goodwill of others, then it is fragile, precarious, always under threat. A single illness, a financial ruin, or an injustice is enough to destroy it. True freedom, the Stoics say, cannot depend on what does not depend on us. It must be inward. Freedom as self-sovereignty. Epictetus, a freed slave turned philosopher, is the living embodiment of this idea. Though he possessed no political power, no wealth, no social status, he nonetheless declared, "You may fetter my body, but you cannot enslave my will." This is Stoic freedom, self-sovereignty. To be free is not to do what one wants, but to want what one does. It is not to control the world, but to control oneself. It is not to abolish external constraints, but to refuse them power over our judgment. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and the most powerful man of his age, wrote in his Meditations, "You can hinder my actions, but you cannot hinder my judgment." Thus, the slave and the emperor converge. True freedom lies not in external power, but in inner mastery. Freedom in the face of the passions. But how can one attain such freedom? By overcoming one's emotions. For as long as I am a slave to my anger, I am not free. As long as I am captive to my fear, I am not free. As long as I am hostage to my desires, I am not free. Inner freedom consists in no longer being governed by one's passions, but by reason. Not by suppressing emotions, but by restoring them to their proper place. Not by denying them, but by transcending them. Take an example. A man is insulted in public. If he becomes angry, he is a slave to another's opinion. If he remains calm, he is free. For he has chosen not to grant the insult power over his peace of mind. Another example. A man loses his fortune. If he collapses, he is a slave to wealth. If he remains dignified, he is free. For he has chosen to judge that riches are not a true good. That is Stoic freedom, not to depend on what does not depend on us. Freedom as invincibility. This inner freedom grants a paradoxical invincibility. For if nothing external can harm me, then I am invincible. Epictetus says, "No one can harm you unless you allow it." Seneca adds, "The wise man is invincible, for he contends with nothing stronger than himself." Marcus Aurelius concludes, "The world may crush me, but it cannot prevent me from being just." This invincibility is not insensitivity. The Stoic feels pain, fear, and sorrow, but he does not obey them. He does not yield to them. He does not grant them power over his life. This is true freedom, not to abolish emotions, but to master them, not to flee from them, but to transform them, not to suffer them, but to use them as opportunities for growth. Freedom in the modern world. And this lesson is not confined to antiquity. It is more relevant than ever. In our modern societies, we believe we are free because we can consume, travel, and express ourselves. But in truth, we are enslaved. Enslaved to our screens, our desires, the opinions of others. We tremble before a negative comment, collapse before failure, and exhaust ourselves chasing material goods. Where, then, is freedom? Stoicism reminds us that freedom is not found outside, but within. It is not found in what we possess, but in what we are. It is not found in what we endure, but in how we judge. It is not found in the world, but in our mind. Freedom as an art of living. Thus, Stoic freedom is not a theory, but an art of living. It is practiced daily, in small things as well as in great ones. It is practiced when I choose not to grow angry in traffic. It is practiced when I choose not to envy another's success. It is practiced when I choose not to fear the future. It is practiced when I choose to remain dignified in adversity. To be free is to choose one's judgment. To be free is to choose one's reaction. To be free is to choose one's life. Dear listeners, we have now reached the end of this journey. Together, we have traversed the tumultuous landscapes of our passions, fear, anger, jealousy, and pain. We have seen that they arise not from things themselves, but from the judgments we make about them. With Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus Aurelius, we have discovered that our emotions are not inevitable, but constructed. And what is constructed can be deconstructed. What is judged can be judged otherwise. So what does it mean to overcome our emotions? It does not mean to suppress them, to smother them, or to become statues of marble. It means to understand them, to master them, to transform them. It means no longer being slaves to our anger, our fears, or our desires, but becoming sovereign over ourselves once again. It means living in harmony with reason, not as a cold logic, but as an inner light that illuminates our choices, guides our steps, and makes us free. Stoicism teaches us that true freedom is not external, but internal. It does not depend on wealth, health, reputation, or power. It depends on our judgment, our will, our ability to say, "What does not depend on me cannot harm me." That is the key to serenity. That is the key to dignity. That is the key to freedom. And this lesson, far from being an ancient relic, is more relevant than ever. In our modern societies, we believe we are free because we can consume, travel, and express ourselves. But in truth, we are enslaved. Enslaved by our screens, by our desires, by the opinions of others. We tremble before a negative comment, collapse before a failure, and agitate ourselves for material things. Where, then, is freedom? It is where the Stoics have always told us it lies, within ourselves. So, dear listeners, I invite you to take that step, to practice this Stoic discipline each day, to distinguish between what depends on you and what does not, to suspend your judgments, to prepare yourself for hardship, to reflect on your actions, to transform your emotions into opportunities for growth. For to philosophize is not to speak, it is to live. It is not to recite maxims, it is to embody them. It is not to flee the world, it is to inhabit it differently. To overcome our emotions is not to become superhuman. It is to become fully human. It is to refuse to suffer twice, once through anticipation and once through exaggeration. It is to refuse to give the external world the power to destroy us. It is to choose to live lucidly, courageously, and with dignity. And if I were to summarize all of Stoicism in a single sentence, it would be this: he who masters his emotions is not a superman. He is simply a free man. Dear listeners, I thank you for accompanying me on this journey. May you, from this day forward, no longer be slaves to your passions, but sovereigns of your lives. May you, in every trial, remember that it is not the event that troubles you, but the judgment you make of it. And may you, at last, live in harmony with reason and find in this inner freedom the only true invincibility. I bid you farewell and leave you with this Stoic exhortation. To philosophize is to learn how to die, but above all, it is to learn how to live.